Hi, my name is Peter Crabtree, and I'm the Deputy Chief Executive here, responsible for strategy and policy here at MSI. It's my great pleasure this morning to welcome Knud Erik Hilding-Hamann from the Danish Technology Institute, who's going to talk to us about the Danish innovation system, the Danish Technology Institute, and some of the programs that they operate in the Danish Technology Institute. For New Zealand, this is just the right time to be having this conversation. There's obviously, this government has a great focus on business innovation, on raising levels of business innovation and getting more value out of innovation. We've had the High Value Manufacturing and Services Review. We've had the government make announcements about its intent to create an Advanced Technology Institute, and getting Knud here is all part of that context and broader thinking around innovation policy at the moment. So it's just the right time. We're really interested in what you've got to say. What we will do is we'll have questions at the end of the session rather than through the session. But it's really over to you, Knud.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me. And thanks to all you lot coming in on an early morning to listen to a silly Viking from up north. I've looked forward to this. I must say I've been here since Saturday. I'm already enjoying this country so much that I don't think I want to be going back. Especially not when we got -10 of where I come from. I've brought my family as well, and they're enjoying your country as well up in Auckland. And we're going back to doing some sightseeing over the weekend to return on Monday. Okay, so I'm going to be talking to you about the Danish innovation system. I want to welcome our colleagues that are beaming in via video conferencing as well. So welcome to you as well. So I was going to take you right from the top, from the equivalent of the MSI in Denmark, through the agencies, the funding agencies that we work with, to the what's called the GTS Network, which is similar to the CRI network here in New Zealand, and the Danish Technological Institute, which is one of those GTSs. I'll then move on to some of the instruments that we're actually using to help businesses in Denmark. I know there's quite a focus here on manufacturing and the challenges that manufacturing is facing, but I can tell you we have similar challenges in Denmark, and I'll also be talking to you about those challenges and some of the future scenarios that we are envisaging for the Danish manufacturing companies for the future. I'll then finish up with some examples of the services and the projects that we run with businesses at our end, and hopefully we'll have some time also to questions. So if along the way you think of questions that you would like to ask, please make a mental note of them, and I'll try and answer them as best as I can towards the end. Okay, does that seem an interesting program? If not, just nod away, and I will skip a few slides. Okay. So, can I actually work that? I can. So that's the program. And this is an overview of the Danish innovation system. From right at the beginning, where we got basic research, to the end where the research is actually commercialized. And you see how the different funding mechanisms spread through the system. And the Danish Technological Institute and the GTSs operate mostly in this area here. We do get into the maturing of markets as well, but we're not doing much in terms of basic research. Apart from picking up research results and bringing them into applied research and applications. Right. So, we work for the Danish Agency for Science, Technology and Innovation, DASTI it's called. And they have 4 focal areas: collaboration between businesses and research, access to highly skilled workforce, and these authorized technological services. So those are the GTSs. And the 4th focal area is commercialization of research. And today I'm hoping to give you a few examples of the type of programs that are being implemented through the different focal areas. Apart from this one here, I will not be touching much on this because we're only involved in the periphery of that at the GTS. But we do actually have a role in actually referring companies to that program. So this is the GTS network, and the main difference, I guess, is that we're self-owned. All these institutes are self-owned, so all the surplus that is generated is ploughed back into the individual institutes. But we do have a commitment and a obligation to report to our ministry, to our agency, in terms of how we perform on the contracts that we have with them. But by and large, the majority of our work is commercial, which you'll see a bit later on in the figures. I won't go into any detail on each of the institutes, but what I can say is compared to the CRIs, we have only a very small involvement in terms of the primary sector. The Agrotech is about 80-90 people and work in some places with primary sector also, but mainly in food production. This is a GTS turnover. I'm sorry the figures are a bit out of date, but the GTS has turned over about 432 million euros in 2009. And as you can see, the majority of that turnover is commercial. Most of it is actually outside of Denmark. So these GTSs are highly internationalized. My institute less so, but some of them are more or less, certainly there are some of them at 70 or 80% of their turnover outside of the Danish borders. The specific performance contracts that we have with the agency is the yellow bit, the 9%. There is other contracts as well with the agency that would go under the black element, which is other R&D funding. The GTSs are highly interactive with the industry. We have about, in 2009, we had 21,000 customers in this network. And many of these are very, very small companies, as you can see. And small here would mean up to 10, 15 employees. And then it drops down in terms of medium and large. But the revenue is higher, much higher, with the larger players. So what we're doing with smaller and medium-sized enterprises is providing them with technical services at a lower scale and a lower budget. So it's smaller services, short-term services that we're providing to them. I'm going to come back to what type of services that might be. Okay. So this is the Danish Technological Institute in terms of its breakdown into divisions and centers. So what you can see is that we are equally fragmented to the fragmentation we're facing in the industry. There are disadvantages of being organized like this, but there are also advantages. The disadvantages are that it's hard to do an overall marketing strategy, an overall marketing attempt at addressing companies in Denmark. The advantage is, of course, the flexibility in each of the centers in terms of developing and adjusting their services to the companies. And this is just a breakdown of customers at the DTI. So what you will notice is that of those 21,000 clients, the Danish Technological Institute does actually count for a very, very high proportion of those clients. And this is because it's mainly the DTI that has provided very entry-level services. The others are more based on larger project and larger service contracts. So between 0 and 49 employees, it's 82% of the companies of our customers that fall into that, and it's 43% of our revenue. And 50 to 199 employees, it drops down. And then you can see, as the companies grow, we have a higher turnover with that segment of the market. And to be quite honest, we couldn't possibly just be focusing on SMEs and not on large companies. There's several reasons for that. One, these types of companies are interlinked in value chains. Some of them are delivering to OEMs, so we have to work with the whole value chain. So we have to work with both the large ones and the small ones in order to really optimize things for them. So these are the types of services that we provide, and many of you might note that, well, consultancy is a bit of a boo word in a GTS context with public funding. And we are going into a grey area here because every now and then we'll have critique in terms of, does the GTSs, do they actually compete with private consultancies? Or is that service that they're providing unique and research R&D based? So we're constantly being asked to demonstrate that this is unique, that this is something that's not available elsewhere in the market. And if we fail in that, we're going to have to abandon those services. We do lots of certification and testing in all types of materials, machinery, etc. It's a very large area for us, 27% of our turnover. We do training, short courses in technical areas for companies. So these are the areas where we really can bring in entry-level services that are not too voluminous for companies to pay for, and get them into the innovation system and bring them into possibly larger project developments from there. I think you've seen similar spreads of qualified academics. We have about 11% PhDs, lots of engineers, other academics 25%, and then other technical staff. That's the breakdown of the 849 people. That's in the core of the Danish Technological Institute. It excludes some of our subsidiaries. And this is the evolution of our turnover since 2001. And the first thing you'll notice is that there's not much of a dramatic evolution here. It's pretty steady growth. We've even had some years where it's dropped a bit. So we don't see much in terms of growth. The key change you will see is that we made a strategy in 2005 that we were going to double R&D. So we were actually, I know there's talks here of bringing, of making a change from being very R&D based to being more consultancy or more customer-led in services. Well, we've gone the other way around. So we've actually committed us to introducing more R&D to supplement our large proportion of commercial activities, which in 2010 was 61.4%. You may notice that we're seeing a slight drop in our commercial activities. So the new strategy from 2012 onwards is that we've now got to double our commercial activities. So now we've built up our R&D portfolio. Now we're going to turn it into real services to benefit companies. So that's where we are heading. The grey area is the performance contracts, which you will notice is fairly stable. Hasn't seen much of an evolution. It's on the annual budget of the government. So it's been set every year. There's been a slight increase, but take away inflation, there's probably not much left there. So the GTS performance contracts, what are they? That was the 9-11% you saw in the grey area. Well, these are 3-year contracts. We are just in the process now of developing our new performance contracts for the period 2013 to 15. Crikey! Yes, we are already starting that process about more than a year before we actually enter into contract with our agency. It's a long-haul process, and some of you might think, well, Christ, R&D is going to move a bit after a year, so will that still be valid? And there will have to be some adjustments along the way. I've brought, actually, just for your interest, a work in progress. So this is how we work on developing proposals for a new performance contract. Okay, I've scribbled on this because together with a couple of colleagues, I'm working on this proposal that we have to supply the agency by March and which will go into a public hearing just before summer for a 3-month period. And it'll be up to us to create the interest from the industry, from the branch organizations, in just the performance contracts that we want to set in place for the future. Okay, so they have their say. Apart from that, they do range from very research intensive to almost operational services. And I'm going to give you some examples of the operational services. The more we move towards operational services, the more we've got to commit to volume in terms of companies we address and we engage with. They must demonstrate international state-of-the-art and links to research communities. They must demonstrate industry participation and partnerships to reach those businesses. And they must operate industry-led reference groups during the program, and they must set specific targets for milestones and for industry involvement. They must also set targets for commercialization of services and impact for participating companies. So we've got to say in these contracts what types of services do we envisage is coming out of that, and why would the companies buy into that. We will report annually on milestones and will be evaluated midterm and at the end of the project, apart from running the reference groups, which will be heard by our agency. So, many of you will be thinking, well, why the hell do you bother? We do that because this is our foundation for the pipeline of services that we are developing for businesses. So this is where we develop the services that are unique, that are not on the market at the moment, but the companies require in order to develop their competitiveness. Some of these services are very operational in their work, so they're not very research heavy. This one is at my heart because I lead this one, and it's very unique in that it involves all the GTSs. All 9 are involved in this project. So I have 35 innovation agents working with me to do innovation checks or audits at companies, to bring them into innovation, bring them into collaboration with knowledge institutions. And why do we do that? We do that because we have data that shows that when you're working with knowledge institutions, you have a higher performance. That's why the agency has set this in motion. And here we're talking volumes. They want us to get out to as many companies as possible and get as many of them involved with knowledge institutions. And they want to bring them up from the bottom. Although they give us a threshold of above 10 employees, we are working with those that have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 9 as well. I'm very proud because we've done very well in 2011. We did 439 audits in 2011. Our goal was 450, but the major and the important one is that we did 407 project initiations. So we got them connected with knowledge institutions 407 times. And the goal was 280. Apart from that, we've done referrals. Referrals, we don't actually connect them. We don't make sure that they are in touch with the knowledge institutions, but we provide them with recommendations. And we've done well on that one as well. So the agency is so happy with the program, they've asked us to do an extra 200 this year. So we've got to do 600 audits this year. It's going to be a tough task. And lots more initiations and referrals. And we can't go back to the others, by the way. It's got to be all new. Another operational service that we provide that I think could be of interest to New Zealand, because every country has some struggle, apart from the US, I guess, with getting IP to commercialization. So what this service does is it's interacting with about 4,500 inventors in Denmark, inventors that both sit in companies, are sole operators, or at a university. And it brings ideas through a process of validation, protecting their rights, and understanding the business potential, etc., to actual licensing of these ideas. I haven't got the performance data on this, but I can provide it if people are interested in it. So this is a service also delivered by the Danish Technological Institute. Another instrument we use is called the Innovation Consortia Program. It's the difference from the performance contract is that here the universities involved, the companies involved, and the GTSs involved commit themselves at the start, at the forefront, to working together over a period of 2 to 4 years to develop applications and services that the companies can exploit in their business, papers that universities can publish, and technical services that the GTSs can commercialize. And we have every year about 10 of these projects that are being initiated. Companies are not funded, so it's just the GTSs and the universities being funded. Companies are putting in and are committing themselves to spending time on the project, and they're actually asked to state what time they'll provide to the project. And they run over 2 to 4 years, and the maximum grant is about 2.7 million euro per project. GTSs will only receive 75% funding, again to incentivize commercialization. And here's some performance data, and I apologize because it's an overlay in terms of English on top of a Danish chart. But what you'll see is that the red stipple one is control companies, whereas the yellow ones are those that actually took part or have taken part in innovation consortia. And the growth is the additional gross profit in 1,000 kroners. In terms of difference from year 0 when the project started. And you can see the difference towards the end in terms of how it impacts on the businesses that actually took part in the consortiums. So, I'm now going to turn to the challenges we're facing in the Danish manufacturing sector. The Danish manufacturing sector is very large, but it's much, much larger outside our country than it is inside our country. Today, it only employs about 350 people, 350,000 people. We've lost over 10 years, 100,000 people in this sector. During the same period, the Danish companies have employed 1.5 million people outside of Denmark. 1.5 million. So we are seeing a dramatic shift in terms of what is it that Danish manufacturing is going to be doing in the future, and what will be offshored, what will be outsourced, and how do we maintain manufacturing in Denmark? Because when you take out the middle part of the process, so from design, ideas, designs, into preparation for manufacturing, and over to sales and marketing. If you take the middle bit out, the innovation system is disconnected within companies, and it's causing problems. So we have to maintain some level of manufacturing in Denmark. As you can see from the lower bullet, the manufacturing sector is very important also for our exports. So a large proportion of our exports is coming out of our manufacturing industries that count about 15,400 manufacturing firms. It's a complex challenge, this. It's about automation, it's about creativity, it's also about productivity. But it's not just about productivity, it's about productivity throughout the whole value chain. So there's no point if you create productivity in one end if you don't do it in the other end of the value chain. It's not enough just to automate what's happening out in the factory floor. It's about really reviewing the setup of the manufacturing altogether. And in terms of creativity, it's, as I mentioned, it's very much an integral process with the manufacturing processes. I saw that at work at one of the companies I visited here in New Zealand yesterday. The company is called Formways. Some of you might know it. And as a matter of fact, they have a workshop right next to where they're sitting and designing all their great ideas. So they're actually manufacturing the chairs, or certainly the prototypes of the chairs, right next to where they're designing it. So it's very much an integral process. And exactly the challenges that they faced is that some of them, those that are manufacturing their product, is DuPont sitting far away from New Zealand. So how do we integrate that so that it's a very fluent process? So investment in R&D leads to higher growth rates, productivity and employment. So we're going to have to work with the companies, the manufacturing companies, to introduce more R&D, more innovation in these companies. The figures tell the tale. The light blue is the R&D active companies, the middle blue is the innovation, but not R&D active companies. And the darker blue are those that are not innovative at all. So you can tell the difference in terms of the value added per employee. How are we doing for time, Isabel? Okay. So, together with a number of universities, we've looked at possible scenarios for future manufacturing in Denmark. These are just initial sketches in terms of how can Danish manufacturing companies maneuver in the global value chains? What roles can they play? And how do they add value? So, one typical example is the virtual company. This is the company that doesn't manufacture at all. This company specializes in knowing exactly where they can get which components manufactured, and they assemble it virtually. So they basically bring the partners together, get it assembled one place, and it's shipped from this place. But the virtual company never sees the product, never has the product in its hands. The value chain integrator is one that brings the value chain together and addresses, for instance, OEM manufacturers, and it could, for instance, be in the what's it called, the windmill industry, which is at the moment undergoing a huge concentration in terms of suppliers to the windmill sector. So the windmill OEM providers are wanting more of the suppliers to take full responsibilities for greater parts of the supplies. This concentration requires value chain integrators. The innovation plant is the company that constantly tunes out new products. Here you're talking about new products being somewhere between 30 or 50% of their revenue. Formways would be a good example of this. Then we have the high competence company and the industrial powerhouse. We don't have many of those in our country. You don't either. Small countries don't have many of these. A good example of a high competence company is Danfoss in Denmark. They provide the sorry?
They do anchors, they do marine.
Yes, they do. Yes. And they're a global company today, and they're they're a leader in their technical field. Industrial powerhouses, we don't have many of them either. But this is a company that is driving the technology, driving the technological development within their sector. So they're constantly at the forefront. Okay, I've added a bit in about, well, how does DTI envisage us contributing to the different types of manufacturing actors in the sector. These are just scenarios. In some of the companies, you will see that they're actually combining some of these features, and one shouldn't take them as a very firm picture of the future, but more as something that can guide us in delivering and customizing our services. we've also given some thought to how the hell are we going to address the various needs that these manufacturers have in terms of strategic direction, in terms of advanced technology products, in terms of the innovative and complex production facilities, and in terms of ensuring that innovation and production go hand in hand. We spend a lot of time actually developing networks and cooperation between firms, bringing them together either in value chains or across sectors to learn from other sectors and the way they do things there. And the lower bit, some of the services that we envisage us delivering to these companies. So in terms of innovative and complex production, we're very much into robots and different robot cells and at different levels. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. In terms of innovation and production going hand in hand, we focus very much on education and training. So we'll be doing lots of short courses in this area. And in terms of strategic direction, we will be focusing much on risk management and on value chain analysis and so forth. I'm sure that you received the handout, so and if there's any questions on any of the service, I'll be glad to help. Okay, I'll now turn to some of the services that we're providing, some of the projects that we've started. And the first one here is called Energy Flex House. So on the campus at the DTI, we built 2 houses that are flexible in the sense that one house is actually inhabited, so there's a family living in the one house, and the other house is a lab. Okay? In this lab, we can flexibly change the source of energy, we can mix energy, we can change the materials that are being used in the house, either for insulation or for ventilation, etc., etc. So even windows. So this is for experimenting in terms of how do we preserve energy, how do we reduce energy consumption, at the same time as we're looking at, well, how do we create quality of life in an environment like this? So how do we ensure that people don't get dry skin or other problems? Okay, you can actually on the net constantly look at the consumption in the various houses of these, so you can monitor what's going on at the energy flex houses. So why and how do we use industry in this? Well, this is a good opportunity for industry to trial and test and apply their materials, their building materials, and their various systems in a setting where they can get results in terms of how does this fit in with the existing system, and how does it affect the various performance indicators. Another example is an earwax filter. Now we're going into the very, very small items and then nano area. Together with a hearing aid producer, Videx, we've actually developed a new filter which prevents earwax and moisture from entering the hearing aid. This is very important because if it gets into the electronics, the hearing aid simply goes bust, and the person needs to buy a new one. So this prolongs the life of the hearing aid by a fair bit. Where did we get the inspiration from? Well, from the water lily, the lotus blossom. So we use biomimics quite a bit in developing products at the DTI, and this is a good example of that. Today, the hearing aid industry in Denmark is a leader in the global market. We have 2 or 3 very big players in Denmark, and we believe that our work is adding to their success. This is coming back to the advanced automation investment model. I'll just move a bit on here. This is to show you that we don't cover everything here. So we work with different levels of complexity in terms of automation, and we don't see ourselves playing a role at the low end of automation, because there the robot suppliers themselves can help the companies in implementing the technology. Our role is to bring them from the lower level of automation to the higher level of automation. In doing that, we're working with the universities who are creating the basic research in this area, and who are really helping the companies right at the top end of the automation level. In over 10 years, the robot use in Denmark has 10 or 15 doubled, but compared to Germany and some of the other big industrial conglomerates, we are still behind. So there is much to do still in terms of automating the industries also in Denmark, and this particular program it's going to help us get there. Here's another example where we're using 3D printing and 3D development to actually reduce scale and weight of components. This particular example, you see the original manifold weighing some 20.15 kilos to this product here, which weighs 0.95 kilos. And you can imagine when you make a shift like that, you're reducing cost dramatically, and which will affect profitability for the companies using these. So there's lots that you can do to actually make your manufacturing companies more advanced and more competitive. Right, I believe that was it. I had. Thank you for listening. Got any questions?